Hi, welcome to Naptime Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian and owner of Baby Bloom Nutrition and Toddler Test Kitchen. And today I am thrilled to have Kelly Euperio with a whole lot of education behind you. I mean, you're a dietitian and lactation consultant. And right before hopping on, we were talking about what CSOM is. And that's, I mean, if you've seen my segment on tongue and lip tide, that's all about that, about the orofacial. It's fascinating. So thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Today we're talking about making the perfect breast milk. And even writing that, it kind of like nails on a chalkboard, right? That's total clickbait.
Right.
Because we're here to talk about how making breast milk it's the most natural thing in the world. But we tend to mistrust our bodies. We don't listen to our hunger and our fullness. We don't listen to a whole lot of things. And breastfeeding really falls into that a lot. We don't trust the amount that we're making. We don't trust that we're giving our babies the right milk. We don't trust that what's coming out naturally is how it's supposed to be, and that we don't actually have to micromanage it. But I'm like undercutting my whole segment here. So, but we do get questions a lot about how can I increase the fat? How can I decrease the sugar in my breast milk? How can I increase the protein? So, are you hearing that a lot, Kelly?
Yeah, definitely a lot of that stuff for sure, and more. And I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll go into that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, and
hmm
being a lactation consultant, I'm sure you're hearing a different angle than I am, just as a dietitian
Yeah.
with that. And
hmm
that's it's wonderful. There are a lot of dietitians out there who are also IBCLCs, and that's a fantastic pairing. I mean, that's a lot of knowledge that you bring to the table. So that's really wonderful. Um,
Thanks.
So the first point is that your body prioritizes milk production. So for better or for worse, your job's body is to produce the perfect milk, and that's what it's going to do. And the reason I said for better or for worse is because sometimes, especially during the postpartum period, especially when we are stressed out and we're acclimating to new motherhood, we've changed identities, even if it's your third child or your ninth child, you still have that shift in identity. It can be very stressful. And if you don't take care of yourself, your body will still prioritize making the perfect milk, which means that your baby's going to get something wonderful, but you still have to care for your own needs as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and this is, for the most part, and for most moms that would be listening, 100% true. you know and there's always the anomalies and the outliers, and I do want to talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, yes, totally. We are all, I mean, if you are deficient slightly in something, which most of us are a little bit, our you will become more deficient and the baby will get what they need. And I think I would say that what I hear most is everyone's worried about their baby getting enough fat. And especially moms with oversupply, they're like, oh, I don't think my mom gets enough fat. But they definitely are getting enough fat. Even they take in a little bit more volume if the fat is a little bit lower per ounce. But it's they've that's one thing they've actually done research on to see.
I think that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
of course, I want to show a viewer comment right now. Megan Rafferty McMillan says Kelly is great. So Megan was on
Yay.
for,
Thanks,
yeah,
Megan.
Megan was on for a recent session we did on breastfeeding and elimination diets. And
Oh.
yeah, that was a good one as well. And so thank you, Megan, for joining me for that. And anyone who wants to find out about that, you can go find that segment as well. So just she's throwing some support, also a dietitian and lactation consultant. So okay, so back to it. I think yeah, it's very interesting. You brought up how if the fat is a little bit lower, the baby will just take a little bit more because we're designed to meet our needs, and we're designed
hmm
from day one to know what our hunger is and how to meet it. And so rather than us having to manage intensely the nutrition in our milk, the baby will do that on their own. And as you said, in most cases, this is the case. So whenever you want to mention those outliers, I know that.
Yeah, no, I will say that we do need to pay attention a lot of times to what we're eating and what we're putting in our bodies. And to say 100% it doesn't impact our milk is actually not being quite on target. So there's some communities that are food deserts, and they are, they have quite a few deficiencies, and we actually see that research has shown that our macronutrients, so fat, protein, carbohydrates, they all stay the same no matter what mom's nutritional status is. However, we do see that micronutrients can change. And we're mostly seeing this in these food deserts. And so, it's also, one of my causes that I really like to support is, community gardens in these areas and making WIC better and making sure mothers know about WIC. Because if, we'll always produce breast milk that will make our babies survive. So no matter what, even if a mother hasn't eaten anything in, weeks, maybe rice only, we will make breast milk that our babies will survive, but our micronutrient levels will change. Now, if you are, an average American woman with privilege, then we really don't, any sort of little tiny changes that we make are really not going to affect our breast milk. But if we live in an area where we don't have privilege, we will see some. Now, a lot of people don't like to talk about that because they're like, oh, then people will just say, oh, I guess that since I live here, I should just have formula, which that's not the case either. Just because we're seeing decreases, if you don't have enough nutrition, actually means that information is power, and moms knowing that is power. Knowing that, and then I think supporting moms, and if we know as professionals that that can be the case, then we can also support those moms a little bit differently and, make sure that we're taking care of mom first. So,
I
so
think that's a
there's,
great, yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And we do have, I think that people who hear about food deserts don't necessarily understand how common they are. And I
mhm,
have seen people saying, well, there are grocery stores everywhere. And we might just say that flippantly. And it's not actually the case.
mm-mm,
I'm privileged enough that I haven't lived in that situation, but when I was a traveling photographer, I was sent to certain areas where the only food that you could get aside from fast food and processed food was at the gas station. They might have a fruit
mhm.
bowl. And so these places really do exist, and they really are an issue for the people who are living there. Thankfully, there is more attention on this issue, and hopefully, we'll be able to improve that situation for the people who are affected by that.
Right. Yeah. And I would say the other outlier that I see that we really need to focus on nutrition is mamas that have gut issues. So
Right.
when a mom has a gut issue herself, then as Jennifer Tao likes to say, heal the mom, you heal the baby. But oftentimes when I see babies that have reflux or colic symptoms, stuff like that, we always start with the mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we look into what's going on internally with her, and I ask her all kinds of digestive questions, and sometimes she's like, oh, why does it matter if I have constipation? you know but but it definitely does. And so with that also, because we want to make sure that they're not having leaky guts and proteins aren't getting into the milk or into their bloodstream, therefore into the milk,
Right. And
that
it's
bother all
fascinating when you
babies.
think about it. It's
Hmm.
fascinating if you think about the amount of the intense route that food takes from going in the mouth to through the digestion into the bloodstream and then into the milk. Our bodies were set up with a lot of checks and balances.
Hmm.
And these whole proteins are not supposed to be making it from the digestive tract into the bloodstream and from the bloodstream
Exactly.
into the milk. So if the baby is reacting, when you think about it on that level, it really does make sense that it would indicate some leaky gut issues or some other kind of intestinal issue in the mother. And so it's always best to explore that. And that's also why you don't want to take advice from social media. You want to see someone who can sit down in
Right.
front of you and ask you those uncomfortable questions about how often you're pooping.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's, so all of this, I feel like it's such a touchy subject because really we should be empowering moms, and with this information, but not scaring moms, you
Right,
know, because for the most part, most people are making perfect breast milk for their baby.
right. The other thing that I've seen that I want to mention, I did a segment on breastfeeding and weight loss. If you are intentionally restricting your diet, that can also affect your breast milk. The same way having not access to that food will affect your breast milk. As we talked about, the food deserts and lack of availability of quality food,
Yeah.
your body does not know the difference whether you're depriving intentionally in order to become smaller to get to your pre-baby weight or whether you don't have access to that food. There is no difference biologically to the way that your body's going to react. I I have spoken with women who were concerned about their breast milk supply, but were at the same time doing master cleanse. And
Mm.
while as we mentioned, most women are going to have perfect milk, if you're doing something extreme with your diet, that really could affect the volume, or at that point, doing a cleanse like that, it could affect the macronutrients of the milk as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Well, I always bring up the anti-diet perspective.
No, I know that's great.
Yeah, well, it's so important. It's really, I think that angle when we're trying to adjust to our new identity, it's really difficult. Everything's different, and our body, the one thing that we feel like we should have control over, isn't acting the way that we're comfortable, isn't acting the way that we're familiar with. And so it's easy to go default and try to chase a dress size or a number on the scale in order to try to regain part of that identity. And it really can affect you. So anyway, getting back on topic, so a lot of women do want to boost supply. And I even heard recently, and I have my own story about my postpartum depression and how I was pumping with twins. I was staying at home with twins, pumping. Why was I doing that? We were supplementing with formula too. And we do crazy things, we do really crazy things. And you don't need a crazy supply. You don't need to compete with other women as far as what your freezer supply looks like. You need to take care of yourself and feed your baby, and everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely true. A lot of women strive to have like this huge freezer full of milk. And, that in itself can also just cause issues, with getting oversupply. Oftentimes, I'll see moms with this crazy big supply, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, is this from overpumping, or is it, biologically, are you having this for some reason? We need to figure out why. And I would say most of the time it's from a lot of pumping. And, sometimes I get started in the hospital, they'll tell them, or they'll get in their heads for some reason at that time that they don't have enough milk when they're supposed to have a pretty small amount at the hospital. And then, on social media, they'll see these freezer fulls um, of breast milk and all these bags, and they think, oh, I need this stash. Everyone talks about the stash, but and then they see like, oh, going back to work, I'm going to pump while I'm there to keep my supply up. And then we're going to, use that fresh milk. We're going to use that milk because that's the milk that has the up to date antibodies, what we're exposed to right then. So if you go pick your kiddo up from a childcare provider and kiss them all over, you're getting all of their germs and making that milk for them, And so you want to use that milk right away. And so then I have these moms who are like, well, I don't know what to do. Should I start working in this milk as it gets closer to 12 months? I mean, and then it's like, well, sure, if you want to use it, I guess, but then you're not using some of the fresh milk. So, I actually usually suggest donating, but
Right. And there are more
yeah,
options for that now than there used to
right.
be.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
And the other concern is, so you mentioned that women over pumping can cause an oversupply. And so, yeah, I can say from personal experience that you're in the hospital, they give you the pump. Here's how you can rent the pump. I don't need the pump. I don't want the pump. My goal with my little one was to not pump.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, that's a great goal. Well, a lot of moms have post-traumatic pumping disorder after their first because they pump so much, and they're
Yeah.
like, "No, I don't want to see that pump ever again." I will say though, I'm just going to throw in a little tip. When they offer you the hospital grade pump at the hospital, do one little tiny pump and then keep the kit just in case you need to rent one, and then you don't have to pay the $50 later. Um,
Oh, good tip.
yeah, because
That's a
some
good one.
moms do need the pump, and of
Sure.
course that's a whole nother story. There's never a one size fits all. Like, we can't tell
Right.
all moms like don't pump. Like, okay, we have to really look at every situation. But just in case, I always say have your insurance pay for it. Get
Yeah.
the kit because you might need it later. Maybe not,
Definitely.
but
And
yeah.
for those pumping moms, I did a full hour nap time nutrition with Amy Fields, who's a nurse and IBCLC,
Yep.
and
Uh-huh.
we did a whole session just on pumping. So there's a whole lot of information there. And like you said, it's
Mhm.
not one size fits all. Some people are going to be only pumping, and some will be only breastfeeding, and some will be doing some combination. And you have to find what works for you.
Right. And everyone's supply is different, everyone's baby's latch is different. Everything is different. And I find that a lot of hospitals actually do have a one size fits all kind of answer,
Yeah.
whether it's don't pump until 8 weeks, or it's pump right away to get your supply up. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember the pediatrician's face in the hospital with my little one when I didn't. We don't expect you to have milk right away. First the colostrum comes in, and it's usually day 3 or 4 where you actually get milk. Well, day 2, they're telling me that I'm not producing milk, so we're going to need to supplement. And I looked at the pediatrician and I said, "This is day 2. I know what the expectations are. We're not going to have this conversation yet." And
Mhm.
funny enough, the minute she left the room, I actually started producing. But that was,
Mhm.
everyone's got funny stories.
Yeah, and I like to actually say that colostrum is milk, you know?
Yeah, that's true too.
It's just really concentrated, and
Yeah.
and it's there for a purpose, and we want that milk. I also was told to supplement. They're like, "Oh, your baby wants to go on every hour." I think that, and I was like, "Well, I think that she's just helping me make the milk," which is true, like, and that was the first night. Yeah, and I did.
Wow.
Yeah, and so.
Yeah, they want that comfort. The baby
Mhm.
was just inside your body for roughly 9 months in that warm and contained and comforting place. All of a sudden, kicked out to the real world. Of course, they want to be at the breast. Why wouldn't
Right.
they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so we have some love from another colleague, Rena Reiser, one of my favorite topics with one of my favorite people. I'm not sure which one of us she's referring to, but Rena's wonderful. She's also a lactation consultant, although not
Oh,
practicing anymore
nice.
in Israel. Um, oh, and I get the text back on the screen. So, okay, so improving the nutrient profile. We touched on this a little bit, especially with fat. People are very
Mhm.
concerned about the fat content. So there's a lot of advice out there. There's all the advice. I mean, if you Google how can I make my milk better, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And the truth is that most of it has nothing behind it. And this is a conversation, if you are truly concerned about your milk, this is a conversation to have with a lactation consultant who can talk to you about your history and your medical chart and your baby's growth patterns and latch and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So,
almost every time a mom comes to me concerned about their milk, because I get that a lot. It's like, or their pediatrician has told them your milk doesn't have enough calories or your milk doesn't have enough fat, so we need to give them formula. Almost always, or actually, I would say, well, yeah, almost always, it is usually that they're not taking in enough volume. It has nothing to do with the milk. The milk is, it has very little variation, you know, and I'll oftentimes do a 24-hour, pre and post weights. So let them have a scale for 24 hours and see what the infant's intake is for that time. And it's almost always a volume issue. Now, what we do see though is sometimes, sorry, I keep doing, I keep moving my screen. Sometimes what we see when a pediatrician says that is it's actually an infant's allergy. So I have seen a few times. So usually it's volume, but I have seen a couple times where the infant has an allergy that they haven't figured out yet, and they're not absorbing the nutrients very well. And so whenever I see sufficient volume, but not enough weight gain, and I always question it. Like if we did 24 hours, I'm like, okay, what'd you do differently in this 24 hours? Did you, increase the number of feeds, but if we figure out, no, this is actually pretty consistent that they're getting enough volume, but still not enough growth. It's the next thing we want to look at is allergies that the infant might have. And because that can cause malabsorption.
That is interesting. And so switching to formula wouldn't necessarily help with that. Although if it's a food allergy, then they may not be exposed to that with the switch. But
Well,
my point is it's not
right.
a necessary switch.
Well, right. And well, oftentimes, so sometimes moms will come and say, formula, they're growing fine on, and breast milk, they're not. Same volume. So if we have an exclusively pumping mom, usually it's gluten because that's the one thing that's not in formula that is in human breast milk. However, then, that's also um, in a lot of areas now, something that's easy to cut out and something that we can really look at. And so that would be a baby that most likely has celiac that we would see the malabsorption with. And I have seen a couple of them.
It's interesting because traditionally celiac is diagnosed much later. So this must be due to more recent research that we're able to link the slow growth with celiac disease.
Yeah, and I actually don't know if there's research on it, but there is research on slow growth with just allergy in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I can't even think where I learned about that. I had a client a few years ago. Oh my gosh, had to be over 5 years ago, actually. And couldn't figure out what was going on at all. And, we figured out that it was as soon as we took out, at that time, that was actually a corn allergy. And as soon as we took out the corn out, and we had to really go deep with the corn, corn can be a really tricky one,
Right.
the baby started growing. And yeah, and so then it's been a journey looking at these from that perspective also.
Wow, that's really fascinating. We have so much more information now than we ever did. It's
Hmm.
amazing. Wow. So there are some things that you might find online if you're trying to quote unquote make perfect milk. That you should be taking a fish oil pill. Well, a lot of my colleagues will laugh at me because that's my solution for pretty much anything is the fish oil. There are a lot of benefits to taking a fish oil, but it's not going to make your milk more perfect than it would have been. I mean, there's a benefit to having those omega-3s, but it's not that everyone should rush out and get a bunch of fish oil pills.
Yeah, totally. There actually is a little bit of research that shows that we cannot impact the amount of fat, but we can impact the type of fat that's in our breast milk. And so, and it hasn't gone in specifically looking at omega-3s, versus omega-6. But we do see like more monounsaturated versus more polyunsaturated or something like that, in the different breast milk. So, that possibly could be a good thing, but it's probably not going to change it too much.
Right. And the other thing
Hmm.
is that if you are eating 3 servings of low mercury fish, you're going to be meeting your needs for fish oil as well. And
Oh,
I have a whole
definitely.
thing on, we'll get into mercury because there's some stuff that you do want to be aware of. Yeah. So another thing is probiotics. And I do have a segment on probiotics. I like probiotics, but there are naturally probiotics in the breast milk. And it's really fascinating to actually look at how they get from the maternal gut into the breast milk. I find that completely fascinating. But if you have fermented foods in your diet, like yogurt, like traditional style pickles, if everything is healthy and there's no other indication that a probiotic would be beneficial, then taking a probiotic is not necessarily going to make many changes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that we want to look at if the baby is having gut issues.
Right.
But, if they're not, then yeah, we don't want to mess with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hmm.
to restate, I'm a big fan of probiotics and fish oil, but when we're talking about micromanaging the breast milk, and the truth
Right.
is that as a new mom, there are so many factors to consider. So we can maybe take a step back and let our body really lead the way on this
Oh,
in most
totally.
cases. So this segment is meant to, like, as a chill pill, kind of. Toss your fish oil and take the chill pill. We're good. So a lot of eat this, not that. There's a lot of
Oh,
like
oh, right.
ridiculous things.
Right. A lot of things that are really healthy too. Like don't eat broccoli, it'll make your baby gassy. And which is not true if we think about how everything gets into the breast milk. Broccoli goes through the digestive tract. It doesn't go, there's nothing that goes into your bloodstream that's going to then make the baby gassy. So we need to, just take a step back and like think about that stuff. But even, something like dairy, that those proteins can affect babies, especially when mom does have a leaky gut and those proteins are getting through into the milk. But if mom has a normal healthy gut with tight junctions, then she can eat dairy, and most likely that mom isn't eating like a ton of dairy, or else she probably would have a little bit of leaky gut. But some dairy in the diet is going to be fine, and the baby will be fine on
Yeah.
that.
I actually
Yeah.
read, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that someone said that she wouldn't go near dairy because the molecule is too similar to gluten and the body gets confused. There is so much weird
The
information out
molecule,
there.
what is the molecule? Does she mean the protein? Like,
I don't.
and which dairy protein? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're on the same page. It's just there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes things can sound like science, but that doesn't
Right.
mean they really are.
Right, just because somebody says molecule.
Yes. There are a lot of true statements in there. There are molecules in both gluten and dairy. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff out there. So some other fun things that I had on my list was you shouldn't cry while breastfeeding.
I've not heard that one.
I think that's a cultural one. I think it's
Okay.
Eastern European.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying whether or not my mother-in-law told me that. Um, but it is common. I believe it's Eastern European tradition to, if the baby will take on your emotions, and if you are breastfeeding, you should maintain a happy, calm, consistent composure so that the baby can benefit from that. And I am just going to outright call BS on it. We are entitled to our emotions.
Mhm.
If you hold them inside, there will be a greater problem later.
Right, exactly. And I feel like if you hold your emotions inside, there'll be higher cortisol, which is probably, maybe where that stems from because we
Yeah.
can give cortisol in our milk. But if we let our emotions out, it's much better. And it's been shown to lower our cortisol levels.
And there's actually been some pretty fascinating research on the composition of tears, and that they actually do contain some level of hormones. So you actually do feel better when
Yeah.
processing emotions that way. And that when you're able to process emotions, you're able to recognize them. And when you can recognize them, you can deal with them. If you push them down, you cannot fix them. So the other
Yes.
one I had was no red hair. And that one I think was medieval, but
So, moms with red hair shouldn't breastfeed?
yeah, no, redheads should not breastfeed.
I have heard a lot that redheads have more pain with breastfeeding.
Oh,
And a lot of IBCLCs say that it's true because they have I don't know, more sensitive skin or something like that. I don't know if I've worked with enough redheads to really know, have any data on that, but as long as you're not feeling pain, I mean, yes, redheads should definitely breastfeed.
That was a ridiculous thing. If you look up the history of wet nurses, redheads were not popular wet nurses because it was said
So
that their
interesting.
yeah their spicy personality would make the babies not follow rules later
Spicy
in life.
personality, huh? Oh my goodness.
There's terrible advice out there.
Oh
Terrible.
my gosh.
Yeah. So so now getting into like the truth. Okay, and I'm going to come back to just all of this stuff fuels guilt. If you find that something is just
Mhm.
fueling guilt or shame, just talk to someone about it. Talk to an IBCLC. Talk to a pediatric dietitian. We can set you straight on what's real and what's not real. And then furthermore, get into just one-on-one troubleshooting to get you past this obstacle.
Yeah. The guilt and the shame thing has really I've really been thinking a lot about that lately, to tell you the truth, because I so I I don't want to. Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth, but so it did. The formula companies really have started like the mommy shaming business, and a lot of that. But I do, and so we want to make sure it's coming from us. And I think when we say that we feel guilty, it's because we want the best for our baby. And I think that most moms feel, at probably every stage of motherhood, that they're not the best mom. You know, I mean, I have felt it. I sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I could have been such a better mom to my kids today. You know, I felt like it when I was breastfeeding, and I had a failure to thrive baby. So before I was an IBCLC and knew anything about this, and it's probably what mostly got me wanting to help other moms. But I think a lot of it does stem from the fact that, we never feel like we're good enough. And, you know, and I think that I mean, we need to be more accepting of not only each other, which I actually feel like most moms that I talk to like really understand if other moms are feeding with bottles and who knows what's in the bottle. Like they understand like it's hard.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's probably less actual mom to mom shaming going on, but more guilt feelings from moms. They're feeling like they had this picture and this expectation of what breastfeeding was going to look like, and that was going to be the best for their baby, and now that it looks a little bit differently for them, they feel guilty. And so we need to not put so much on ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because it's true. No matter what you think someone has going on behind the scenes of their perfect Instagram account, we all have that feeling that we could have done better. And even if it was a perfect day, there's something you could have done better. And our kids think that we're the most awesome people in the world. I mean, my oldest are about to turn 7, so they're still at that. Anyone who has a teenager is welcome to come like give, give me grief about that statement. But when they're little, they think that we're just the best thing in the world, and they want to spend time with us, and they want to try to be like us. And if we could maybe take on some of that in place of some of that massive guilt that we're constantly carrying around, that would be better for everyone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some stuff that's actually true about things
Okay.
you should actually watch out for. So I mentioned the mercury thing. This is more of a big deal during pregnancy, but mercury is always a big deal in fish. So we're more careful about it during pregnancy. Keep being a little bit careful about it now, but you want to have lower mercury fish. And the high mercury fish are big eye tuna. So not all tuna. People tend to say tuna, but it's a specific kind, big eye tuna. So your chunk light is lower in mercury. Mackerel, marlin, orange roughy, shark, swordfish, and tilefish. Those are higher in mercury. You can have them sometimes, but ideally those shouldn't be, when you're having 3 servings per week, they shouldn't all be from that list.
Yeah, nothing
And
to
then,
add.
yeah, there are
Mhm.
certain herbal supplements and
Uh-huh.
teas that can affect your supply. Do you want to talk about some of those? I know peppermint is one of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to avoid peppermint, and sage is another one. And then there's some that definitely increase supply. So I am, you mentioned your mother-in-law. I will mention my mother-in-law. So she is from the Philippines, and they take care of their moms right after birth and really give them nourishing foods for lactation. And malunggay, or here in the US, we hear it referenced as moringa, is
Right.
one, it's a green leafy vegetable that they make soups out of and make all kinds of, it's mostly soups on rice with malunggay, and give it to their moms. And here in the US, we mostly see it packaged as moringa in pills. But that is one of my absolute favorite herbal supplements that I see does increase supply. And there's actually research that it does also to back it up, which is one of the
Interesting.
only ones that there's research on. Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder if it's available in its whole food form so we could maybe experience some of those
It
dishes.
is. It is actually. So my mother-in-law actually found some at one of the Asian markets here after I had my baby, and they made some of those dishes for my first when they were here.
Wow. Well, what a
Hmm.
great opportunity to try something fun from a different culture. That's
Right. I mean, yeah.
wonderful.
I mean, in our house, like it's kind of our culture because my husband makes some of the foods. But yeah, it's I really like the nourishing aspect of it, and the fact that it's, even though we see it more as an herbal supplement here, it's actually a green leafy vegetable. And so taking a
Yeah.
lot of it is also okay. And we see that the way that it increases supply is it actually increases our prolactin levels.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Wow. So I learned something new today.
Great.
I love it. That's wonderful. And then of course, alcohol and caffeine are always questions. Um, and I think there's some pretty solid information out there now. You can have some, not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as far as alcohol goes, the the whatever your blood alcohol level is, that's what's the breast milk blood. I mean, that's what the breast milk alcohol level is going to be. So if you're zero point zero 0.08, the breast milk you're going to be drinking is zero point zero 0.08. So it's not like they're drinking like a 6% beer or something, it's going to be very low. And we know that orange juice actually has a higher alcohol content than zero point zero 0.08. And so really, I mean, advise moms that unless they like are way off their rocker, it's probably fine to feed the baby. And
Right.
if they aren't comfortable with it, then okay, they could think about then pumping for that time that their blood alcohol level is higher. And some moms will choose then to mix it with other breast milk to dilute it even further. But really, it's not needed. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, there is evidence, though, that if mom it has a consistently higher blood alcohol level, that's different. So if a mom is drinking every single night, or where a mom that might have an issue, and we're not talking about like one small glass of wine, something like that, but a few glasses of wine consistently over time can make a difference. So we want to avoid that for sure.
Interesting. And I know a lot of women believe that drinking beer, specifically stout beer, can help increase supply. But it is important to know that it's only stout, not Corona. Um, and
Yeah,
what's
because of the
your
brewer's yeast in it. Yeah,
right?
and I would say that some moms do feel that. There's also though the fact that the just alcohol in general makes you less stressed, which we know also makes us make more milk. And, especially lets us have a bigger letdown because of more oxytocin. There's always more oxytocin flowing when we have a little alcohol in us. And,
Right.
you know, and so sometimes I don't know if it's perception or just a bigger letdown or if it really did increase at that one time. Who knows?
Yeah.
And
Well,
as far
that's
as, oh, yeah.
that's the
No,
trouble with the research, that sometimes we see a correlation, but we don't know the causation. And we can
mhm.
say, well, there was a bigger letdown or there was more volume when she did this, but we don't know. Maybe yoga would have had the same effect because of the relaxing, or maybe a really good hug would have had, the
Right.
oxytocin
Or
release.
a massage or, yeah, loving words, you know.
Whatever your love language is, maybe a nice
Right.
bracelet.
Right. Talk to your mothers kindly. But yeah, as far as caffeine goes, caffeine's a pretty big molecule and has a hard time getting into breast milk. And so, except unless we're taking in high amounts, it's probably not going to affect the breast milk.
Well, I think that's a relief for a lot of moms to hear.
Hmm.
Um, from what I've read, it seems like 300 milligrams is that's where people put the mark, whether that's accurate or not. But that's more than a cup of coffee. I think that's two, maybe even 3 cups of coffee, depending on what exactly you're drinking. So
Yeah, what type? Yeah,
yeah,
unfortunately, and this goes for everything with breastfeeding and breast milk, is there's not enough research. So
right.
a lot of it is anecdotal. And so I never put a number on it.
Hmm.
Moms can pay attention to their babies and, usually it also depends on the like for me, I don't drink any caffeine because I don't detox it well at all. I'm jittery for forever. And so if I had that amount of caffeine, like it probably, I just have a feeling it probably wouldn't go well and, at all.
Right.
But a mom that is used to drinking that much over time, I mean, the same thing with pregnancy, if it's probably better just to keep drinking it, especially if
Mhm.
you're not seeing that it's impacting your baby at all.
Right. So it's very individual, and I like to tell people, when people ask about research, and a lot of times with pediatric nutrition, with breastfeeding, we don't have research, and the reason is that it's not very ethical to perform some of these studies that we would have to perform in order to get solid answers.
Yeah, that, and I think for breastfeeding, we have a very paternalistic society where I think if it was men breastfeeding, we would have a lot more of these answers. um, but because some of these questions actually, maybe not with regards to different substances, like we're not going to load a mom up on caffeine and then see what happens, but we could see how much of it's in the breast milk, you
Right.
know depending on if she was still feeding a baby or not, and or just during that time, there are ways to get a lot of these answers, but there's not a lot of researching breastfeeding.
Right.
And there are a lot of there is a lot of research looking into what's in breast milk, and that's done by the formula companies in order to try to make a more similar product, which is great and fine. But we just don't have any big sponsorships, that want to pay for breastfeeding research and a lot of and so
Right.
we don't have a lot of answers, unfortunately, to really, I think, a lot of basic questions that a lot of moms expect that there must be a lot of research into.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we're left with a lot of questions, and
Yeah, and a
but
lot
as
of
far
anecdotal evidence.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
right. And the anecdotal evidence, it's funny because the term itself is problematic, because anecdotes are not scientific evidence. But I love that term, because if something's been going on in a culture for thousands of years, I like to at least consider it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that's,
Hmm.
when we have this conversation about soy or about white rice and these health implications, and you look at Asia, well, they've been subsisting on these things for thousands of years. So chances are it's not going to kill you immediately, or even over a few generations. So we can start our questioning, start the conversation from that point, understanding that certain things have been around for a very long time, And it's not that that's the basis for evidence in and of itself, but it's always good to keep that in the back of your mind when you're talking about these things. A lot of staple foods have come under the microscope in recent years, and well, the headlines are much more dramatic than the actual research is coming out. So it's good to keep that in mind.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the one last point I wanted to bring up, which is part of the reason why we did this whole talk, I was asked to weigh in on an article on exercise and how it changes the composition of breast milk. And this study showed that moderate exercising increases this 3SL, which is a prebiotic, and it sets your infant up for a good microbiome, which has all kinds of positive benefits. And this poor reporter, I just kind of went off on her because the thing is that it's good to have research in a vacuum, because as you mentioned, we're using that research in order to make formula more similar to breast milk, and that's a fantastic goal. That really is. But we can't just put another to-do list on a woman who's just had a baby, because as we mentioned at the beginning, circling back from the beginning, the body prioritizes taking care of the baby. The body will wake up regardless of the amount of fatigue, will wake up to the baby's cry. The milk will be produced regardless of what she's eating. And um, and we need to have a broader view of health. We need to stop looking at weight and the scale, and we need to start looking at the mental status. Our rates of depression and anxiety in perinatal women, these things are not being caught. So you can't just say, oh, hey, do a couple workout videos. It's better for your baby. It'll make your milk better. The amount of stress that that suggestion will put on the mom will counteract the benefit. I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about cortisol, and you said cortisol can get in the breast milk. We don't need to be overtaxing moms, so we need to be careful with how that information is conveyed, and the fact that the milk is fine. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, if we're talking about one prebiotic, like, can, it doesn't really make sense. Like, if you look at, like, if you're even just looking at, like, oh, what's in a probiotic, or if you're, taking prebiotic, I mean, like, one, that,
Right.
you know, but, you and I can look at that and be like, well, that's actually not that big of difference right there.
Yeah.
That's all they're seeing. Because, I mean, honestly, it's like, well, of course we need to move our bodies, you know?
Right.
And I look at that and I'm like, oh, there's only one prebiotic difference that they're seeing from that. That's actually not much. Let's relax, mamas,
Yeah.
because we also know that mamas need recovery after birth. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, we don't want to pressure moms into it. And most will move their bodies when they feel that they can, and
Right.
that, because they want to get their infants outside, maybe go for a walk, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, but, and so I think that, just talking about making healthy habits and whatnot is fine when the mom feels ready,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I look at that research and I'm like, one prebiotic, I mean, that's the only difference that they're seeing. That's like
Right.
nothing. That's nothing
Yeah.
with the
A clove of
millions.
Yeah, a clove of garlic on its own has three different classifications of prebiotics. So it's
Right.
really, if we're looking at this one factor, it's not really a big deal. And the big thing to me is the psychological relationship with that. If you are told you need to exercise so your milk can be good, it's very
Exactly.
different from, hey, I did this YouTube video class and it was really fun.
Right.
It's really different, because in the first one, you introduce that dynamic of shame and guilt. And in the second one, you're saying, hey, I'm taking care of myself and my baby's also benefiting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, you showed that article with me, and before I even read it, I was just like, "Oh my God, the title." You know? I mean, because I don't know if clickbait or what but yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
even. Mhm.
Well, it's
It does. It
clickbait,
makes
just like my title here, and it
right.
doesn't feel good, but that's what you get people to pay attention to. You know,
Right.
that's unfortunate. Everything has to be very dramatic in order to draw attention, and it's got to sound sciency. And then here we are with all of our fancy letters and all of our fancy paper from fancy universities, and people don't necessarily listen any louder than to the pop culture.
Yeah.
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 Oh, well, that's a depressing note. All right. Well, let's end with a fun question. What is your favorite kind of ice cream?
Oh, vanilla. That's
You know
easy.
what? A good vanilla is like,
Yeah. Well, I also like, there's an ice cream shop near me that has this cherry basil once in a while. And they have
oh,
also sometimes blackberry lavender. So I love like those too. They have like an herb flavor.
yeah.
So, but usually vanilla. I'm pretty
Oh,
boring.
okay. No, I don't think it's boring. I think it's like that's how you test the quality of a
Yeah,
company is their vanilla.
they're
Because if their
vanilla.
vanilla isn't good, then don't bother with anything else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my favorite is Ben and Jerry's fish food, and I'm holding
Oh,
tight to that.
I don't even know what that is.
Really?
No.
Okay, that's your homework. That's your
Okay.
homework. Well, thank
That's
you so much,
funny.
Kelly, for joining me on this segment. It was really super valuable, and um, I hope that everyone got what they needed out of it. But welcome to ask questions in the comment box, and I'll be watching that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks
Oh,
so much for having me. Oh,
and where can people find you? I almost forgot.
so I'm not really on Facebook too much. I do have a Boulder Valley Lactation Facebook site, but I really am, I don't know, I'm not really on it very much. I'm more on Instagram at Kelly IBCLC. And my website is bvlactation.com, BV for Boulder Valley.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate that wonderful weather in Boulder. We are roasting over here in Phoenix.
I will. I will.
Well, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.